Douglas Robert Stewart Bader reported to RAF Cranwell in 1928 with the kind of confidence that made preceptors either respect him or want to recruit him. Born in February 1910 in St. John Stood, London, he would grow up with an imperturbable belief that rules were suggestions and that utmost people upset far too important about consequences. His times at St. Edward's Academy in Oxford had produced a rugby player of genuine gift and a cricketer who played with further aggression than finesse. When he arrived at Cromwell, the preceptors set up a pimp who could fly brilliantly when he bothered to concentrate and recklessly when he did not. He passed out in 1930 with solid marks and a character for low-position acrobatics that gave his fostering officers digestive problems. His first posting transferred him to No. 23 Squadron at Kenny Flying Bristol Bulldogs. Stocky little biplanes with radial machines that sounded like angry sewing machines. The Bulldog was formerly getting obsolete by the time Bada climbed into one, but it was maneuverable enough for the kind of showing off that youthful aviators considered essential to their social standing. He spent his off-duty hours playing rugby for Harlequins and making a nuisance of himself at the Reading Aero Club, where he had performed unauthorized dramatic displays that had the club clerk drafting complaint letters, which he never relatively transferred. December 19th, 31 arrived. Cold and Argentine over Whittier Drome near Reading. Baker had flown over in an Afro Type 5004, a biplane with all the grace of a theater exfoliate with bodies to visit, musketeers, and presumably to show off a bit. The details of what happened next remain disputed, but the essential data is severely clear. He tried some low-position acrobatics, conceivably a slow roll, at an altitude that left precisely no periphery for error. Observers reported the aircraft's sect tip trimming the ground during an initiative. The Afro cartwheeled across the aerodrome, disintegrating as it tumbled. Essence screamed. Wood splintered. The machine tore free from its reinforcements. They pulled Baker from the wreckage, conscious but catastrophically injured. His right leg had been nearly disassociated above the knee. His left leg was crushed beyond any stopgap of saving it. Blood soaked through his flight suit and pulled on the frozen ground. The ambulance crew worked with hopeless effectiveness, applying tourniquets that presumably saved his life in those first critical twinkles. The trip to Royal Berkshire Hospital in Reading took less than 20 twinkles, but Bada drifted in and out of knowledge throughout his body, mourning to shut down from shock and blood loss. The surgical platoon faced an agony script. The right leg needed immediate amputation. There was simply nothing left to save. The left leg presented a more agonizing decision. The damage extended from his ankle through his thigh with emulsion fractures and massive soft towel destruction. The youthful surgeon on duty made the call quickly. Reattach below the knee on the left, above the knee on the right. Speed signified further than conserving length. Infection would kill him briskly than blood loss if they did not work quickly. Baker went under anesthetic, not knowing whether he would wake up at each, let alone what he would wake up to. His flying career, everyone assumed, had ended before his 22nd birthday. His life itself hung suspended nearly between the operating theater and whatever comes later. He woke in stages, swimming up through morphine fog towards a reality that his brain defied accepting. The Royal Berkshire Hospital room smelled of detergent and commodity differently, commodity organic and wrong that he had latterly faked as the scent of surgical injuries trying to heal. His first coherent study was not about his legs. It was confusion about why the bed felt so short, why his bases, he could still feel his bases, sounded to be resting closer to his body than they should. Also, a nanny appeared beside him, her face professionally composed in that particular way that healthcare workers learn when they are about to tell someone something dreadful. The right leg was gone from the medial ham. The left leg ended just below the knee. She explained this with applaudable honesty, though she was okay slightly as she acclimated herself. Bader's response came part of the RAF legend, though accounts vary on the exact words. Some performances have him making a dark joke. Others report a long Silence before he asked about flying again. What is certain is that he did not weep or rage, at least not where anyone could see. The emotional reckoning would come later in the small hours when morphine wore thin and phantom pains induced him that his missing legs were still attached but trapped in some insolvable position he could not acclimate. Infection arrived within days, as it so frequently did in 1931. The surgical spots turned angry and hot. His temperature spiked to dangerous situations. The medical platoon battled sepsis with the limited tools available before. Wide antibiotic use, drainage, decrement, sulfanilamide grease paint that soaked like liquid fire. For nearly a week, the odds favored his death. His family Daphne visited and set him up delirious, talking to people who were not there, his body burning through its remaining reserves. The sanitarium chaplain began making subtle medications. Also, for reasons that presumably owed further to Bard's bloody-inclined constitution than to medical intervention, the fever broke. His body began winning the city war, passing in his surgical injuries. Recovery meant literacy to live in a body that no longer matched his internal chart of himself. Phantom Branch agonized him constantly. His missing bases itched. His absent toes cramped. His missing knees ached in ways that real knees never had. The nursing staff tutored him to manage his holes, to watch for breakdown in the mending towel, to tolerate the personality of bed, kissers, and sponger cataracts. He was 21 times old and required backing at every introductory function. The cerebral weight of this reliance crushed him more effectively than the accident had crushed his legs. Callers arrived with forced gayness and eyes that dallied too long on the flat spaces beneath his robes. Fellow aviators from 23 Squadron came bearing magazines and awkward silences. They meant well, but their discomfort filled the room like a bank. They were defying their own mortality through his injuries, imagining themselves in that sanitarium bed and chancing the image intolerable. The exchanges never lasted long. They had promised to return, and occasionally they did, but the visits grew less frequent as weeks passed. Bader was getting a ghost, an exemplary tale, a memorial of what happened when you pushed your luck too far at low altitude. The RAF's response came through sanctioned channels and with regulatory uncertainty. Medical discharge, pension, remorsat. The loss of a promising officer. The paperwork arrived whilst he was still learning to sit upright without conking from the blood pressure changes. He read the discharge notice and understood that the service was writing him off as completely, as the surgeons had reattached his legs. Invalid. That is what the forms called him, deduced from Latin. Not valid, without value. He folded the papers precisely and said nothing, but commodity hardened inside him during that moment. They allowed. He was finished. He would show them how wrong they were. The prosthetic branches arrived from Data Sisters in January 1932, and they looked like a commodity erected to furnish a particularly bleak gallery exhibition. Mircea Dusa, himself an amputee airman, had designed the aluminum legs after losing his own branch in a flying accident. So at least the creator understood the specific torture of being predicated. The artificial legs counted roughly 8 pounds, each with leather bond that strapped around the holes and mechanical knee joints on the right side that clicked and locked with all the slyness of a door hinge. The bases were solid rubber affairs with no ankle articulation. Walking on them, Baker snappily discovered, felt like trying to navigate the world while standing on justice. The pain during those first attempts defied description. His whole body, still tender from surgery, had to bear his entire body weight through the prosthetic sockets. The skin broke down constantly. Pocks formed, burst, and came infected. The leather cuffs rubbed raw patches that would not heal because he refused to stop rehearsing. Physiotherapists at Hampton Hospital watched him work with an abundance of admiration and concern. Utmost amputees demanded months to achieve introductory mobility. Bader was trying to run within weeks, falling constantly, hauling himself upright and trying again with language that made the runners pretend they had suddenly gone deaf. He approached Recuperation like a military mission. Each morning began with examination of his holes, checking for pressure blisters, hot spots, any sign of towel breakdown that might force him to stop. He learned to apply padding precisely where the prosthetics bore down hardest. The right leg, with it below knee amputation, proved particularly delicate because he demanded the natural knee joint to help control the artificial branch. Every step needed conscious study. Lock the knee, shift weight, swing the leg, forward, unleash the knee at precisely the right moment. Catch yourself before you pitch forward. His brain had to relearn walking from the first principles, booting 2 decades of unconscious movement patterns. By March, he could navigate stairs, a feat his physiotherapist authentically had not anticipated. By April, he was driving a modified auto with hand controls, spooking the roads around Hampton, with the same cheerful casualness for safety that had characterized his flight. He played golf poorly but decisively, developing a swing that compensated for his incapability to shift his weight naturally. He indeed tried ice skating, which ended predictably, with him sprawled on the ice, laughing at the absurdity of it, while frustrated bystanders rushed to help him up. The communication he was transferring to himself as much as anyone watching was unmistakable. His body might have changed, but his abecedarian bloody-mindedness remained complete. The RAF Medical Board in June 1932 examined him with professional thoroughness and concluded what sounded egregious to everyone except Baker himself. He was permanently unfit for flight duties. The board members were not being cruel. They were applying reasonable norms to an unknown situation. No airman had ever returned to functional flight after losing both legs. The physical demands sound invincible. High G pushes in combat would produce forces his prosthetics could not handle. Rapid relaxation at altitude might cause his holes to swell dangerously. And what would be if he demanded to bail out? The questions had no answers because no bone had ever faced them. Ahead, Baker accepted the medical discharge with outside grace and inward fury. The RAF gave him an office job at the Asian Petroleum Company, where he pushed papers and sluggishly suffocated under the weight of normal. 7 times. He lived in an Argentine limbo, married a woman named Thelma Edwards, who loved him despite his moods and tried to convince himself that mercenary life could be enough. It was not. He remained an airman without an airplane, a legionnaire without a war. Also in September 1939, Germany raided Poland, and suddenly the RAF's norms for what constituted fit for duty began to shift. War press expansion in late 1939 meant the RAF demanded aviators more desperately than it demanded to maintain reconciliation medical norms. Bader wrote letters, polite at first, also decreasingly pertinacious, reminding the Air Ministry that he could fly impeccably well and that artificial legs were vastly easier to replace than educated aviators. The first responses were polite condemnations. The alternate surge of letters entered no response at all. The third batch, written in early 1940, as the phony war continued and airman training programs plotted to meet demand, eventually landed on an office belonging to someone willing to take a calculated threat. And as the pressures of command mounted, the situation only grew more complicated. Air Vice Marshal Hallahan, remembering Bader from Cranwell, approved a flight test at Roehampton. The examiner arrived expecting to confirm what everyone assumed, that a man with metal legs couldn't truly fly again. But watching Bader pull himself into the cockpit with a strength built from years of compensating for immobile limbs, then take the trainer smoothly into the air, erased most doubts. His aerobatics settled the rest. When he landed, the examiner hesitated only long enough to weigh caution against reality. Bader was cleared, provisionally, for non-operational flying. Not enough, but a foothold. By February 1940, he'd pushed his way into number 19 Squadron at Duxford. The Spitfire Mki, far more demanding than the biplanes he'd flown before the crash, forced him to relearn rudder work through his prosthetic feet. His control movements were heavier and less graceful, but they worked. His first real patrol came during the chaos of Dunkirk, where he downed a Bf-109 almost before he realized what was happening. One burst, a shattered canopy, a spiral into the sea. In the months that followed, Bader uncovered an odd advantage his artificial legs gave him. Without blood pooling in his lower limbs, he grayed out a little later than other pilots during tight turns. It wasn't dramatic, but in combat, even a second of extra vision could decide survival. He used it mercilessly, cutting tighter arcs than German fighters expected. By August, he commanded No. 242 Squadron at Coltishall. His score rose steadily, and so did his reputation, equal parts admiration and unease. To some he was fearlessly aggressive. To others, he was a man who had already lost everything once and no longer cared what happened to himself. Regardless, pilots followed him. Seeing a man with artificial legs outfly the Luftwaffe expanded their sense of the possible. Then came the big wing controversy. During the height of the Battle of Britain, Bader became the loudest advocate for massing several squadrons into one large striking force, an idea championed by Air Vice Marshal Trafford Leigh-Mallory of No. 12 Group. Park, running No. 11 Group in the southeast, called it fantasy. His units were already scrambling to meet raids as they crossed the coast. Waiting to assemble a wing meant losing airfields and factories. Bader took command of the Duxford Wing in September 1940, leading 242, 310, and 616 squadrons. When the system came together, the results were devastating, like the interception over London on September 7th, where his pilots tore into Dornier bombers and scattered the formation. But when timing failed, the wing arrived too late to help Park's exhausted squadrons. Beneath the tactical disagreements ran something deeper. Bader was a pre-war officer trying to impose rigid discipline and relentless aggression on younger wartime pilots who didn't always share his instincts or his appetite for risk. And yet, even as his reputation grew, the strain inside his own squadrons became impossible to ignore. A number of pilots quietly asked for transfers, unable to balance Bader's brilliance in combat with his rigid approach to planning. Others admired him precisely because he seemed unshakably certain at a time when nothing in Britain felt secure. His leadership drew heavily from his rugby days, plain-spoken, impatient with excuses, and convinced that success came from collective discipline, not individual heroics. Briefings often felt like team huddles as he paced before his men, the metallic click of his artificial legs echoing across the hangar floor. He demanded tight formations, mutual protection, and restraint in chasing personal kills, then inevitably broke those rules in the chaos of combat. By December 1940, he had 12 confirmed victories, with more listed as damaged or probable. Promoted to acting wing commander, he moved to Tangmere in March 1941, switching from home defense to offensive sweeps over occupied France, circus operations designed mainly to force the Luftwaffe into battle. The raid's strategic value was debatable, but for aggressive pilots like Bader, they offered near-daily fights. Through spring and early summer, he added steadily to his tally, a Bf-109 in March, another in April, and 2 more during a savage June engagement over Bethune. The paperwork of war quietly transformed these violent seconds into neat logbook entries as his score passed 15, then 20. On August 9, 1941, everything unraveled. The target was a power station near Gosnay, hardly vital, but enough to justify sending the Tangmere wing deep into France. 5 squadrons crossed the channel in layered formation, contrails stretching behind them. German radar tracked them from the moment they left the English coast. The enemy fighters struck from above, diving through the sun just as Bader himself had done countless times. The radio filled with clipped warnings, snappers, 6 o'clock high, before dissolving into total confusion. Spitfires and Messerschmitts twisted through the sky, tracers carving bright arcs through the haze. Bader latched onto a Bf-109, closed to 200 yards, and tore pieces off its wing root. It fell away smoking. What followed remained a blur even to him. A violent impact, collision, cannon fire, or possibly a burst from a friendly Spitfire, shattered his aircraft. The tail separated. The fuselage tumbled. His artificial right leg snagged on something as he tried to escape. He forced it free, felt it detach from its straps, and then the slipstream ripped him out. His parachute snapped open, leaving him hanging in sudden, eerie quiet as the remains of his Spitfire spiraled into the fields below. He landed hard near the village of St. Omer, rolling awkwardly with only one prosthetic leg left. Wehrmacht infantry reached him within minutes. They treated him with polite, almost ceremonial care, surprised that a pilot had survived such a breakup. A young officer, speaking decent English, asked whether he was injured. Bader, bleeding from cuts and missing a leg, replied that he'd certainly been better but appreciated the concern. The Germans helped him into a truck with the caution one might use on unexploded ordnance. At Dulag Luft near Frankfurt, interrogators attempted the usual mix of courtesy and subtle pressure, but Bader gave only his name, rank, and number. Wing Commander Douglas Bader, 33777. Nothing more. After 3 days they abandoned the effort and transferred him to Stalag Luft 3 in Sagan, where his captivity truly began. By August 1941, the camp held around 800 Allied airmen, a number that would swell to thousands. Built in sandy pine country, the ground made tunneling both tempting and treacherous, easy to dig, but prone to collapse. Bader arrived still missing his right prosthetic leg, tapping across the boardwalks on crutches, the single remaining artificial limb clicking rhythmically. The commandant, Oberst Friedrich Wilhelm von Lindner, received him formally and made what he clearly believed was a generous offer, and the commandant's generous offer received the kind of reply only Bader could give. If he pledged not to escape, von Lindner explained, he would enjoy greater freedom within the camp. Bader answered with flawless courtesy that escaping was an officer's duty, and that he would never give his word to stay put. The commandant, long familiar with troublesome prisoners, assigned him to the East Compound, where British and Commonwealth airmen had already organized escape plans with a level of bureaucracy rivaling a government ministry. Bader threw himself into these efforts almost immediately, even though his missing prosthetic leg limited what he could physically do. Through Red Cross channels and coded messages, the RAF arranged for a replacement leg to be dropped during a bombing raid, an absurd-sounding plan that actually succeeded. The Germans, out of sportsmanship or paperwork inertia, allowed it through. By December 1941, he once again had 2 functioning artificial legs and became one of the camp's most relentless escape plotters, even though crawling through cramped tunnels was nearly beyond his physical limits. His first escape attempt in March 1942 used a tunnel that collapsed just short of the wire, nearly burying 2 diggers alive. His second, in June, involved hiding in a rubbish cart until guards began probing the load with bayonets. His third, a September attempt involving forged papers and a disguise as a German officer, fell apart when the forger was transferred. None of these plots achieved a breakout, but all forced the Germans to devote more men, more inspections, and more energy to containing the prisoners, an indirect way of waging war that Bader instinctively understood. After a 4th attempt in January 1943, another tunnel, this one actually reaching beyond the perimeter, the Germans confiscated his artificial legs, locking them in the commandant's office. He spent 3 days on improvised crutches until the senior British officer protested on Geneva Convention grounds. The legs were returned, along with stern warnings that accomplished nothing. Bader immediately rejoined escape planning, eventually contributing to early preparations for what became the Great Escape. He was transferred to Colditz before that breakout took place, sent to the fortress reserved for the most incorrigible prisoners. Even there, he continued scheming until advancing Soviet artillery finally ended the possibility of further attempts. News of his survival reached Thelma in April 1945, shortly after Colditz was liberated. The war in Europe ended weeks later, and Bader was swept into the frantic repatriation of thousands of POWs. He returned to England gaunter, his uniform worn thin, but already thinking about resuming his RAF career as if the last 4 years had been an extended detour. The Air Ministry took months to verify his combat claims, cross-checking witness reports and gun camera film. The final tally credited him with 20 confirmed victories, plus shared kills and probables that brought the total to roughly 22. Impressive numbers made more striking by the fact that he achieved them while commanding formations, not chasing personal scores. Honors followed, the Distinguished Service Order and Bar, the Distinguished Flying Cross and Bar, and a mention in dispatches. King George VI presented the medals at Buckingham Palace in July 1945, photographers capturing the monarch shaking hands with a fighter ace whose legs were held together by leather straps and aluminum rivets. Peace, however, proved awkward. The RAF downsized rapidly, and the available roles revolved around staff work, budgets, procurement, training memos, everything Bader had disliked before the war. He accepted a permanent commission as group captain, but found the administrative world suffocating. Meanwhile, public demand for war stories surged. Paul Brickhill's Reach for the Sky appeared in 1954, becoming a bestseller and transforming Bader into a symbol of uncomplicated heroism. The 1956 film adaptation, with Kenneth More portraying him in resolute fashion, cemented the image. Bader himself often found the attention uncomfortable, especially when people expected him to perform the role of war hero on command. He retired from the RAF in 1946 and joined Shell as an aviation fuel manager, where he proved unexpectedly adept, applying his aggressive, focused energy to negotiations and logistics instead of dogfights. It kept him involved in aviation without forcing him to watch younger men fly the jet aircraft that had rendered his beloved Spitfires relics. He continued flying privately, but the jet age belonged to another generation. Debate persisted about whether his disability hindered or helped him, though Bader dismissed the question as meaningless. He'd succeeded despite the legs, he argued, not because of them, though the psychological drive to prove himself and reduced fear of injury certainly shaped his combat style. What mattered was the example he set, that injury did not equal uselessness, that adaptation and willpower could push past limits thought absolute. In later decades, he became more than a wartime figure. He became a symbol for disabled veterans and amputees. His presence at rehabilitation centers carried more weight than any speech. Walking on artificial legs while speaking of air combat provided tangible proof that life did not end at injury. Through the Douglas Bader Foundation, founded in 1982, he supported advancements in prosthetics and resisted portraying disability as tragedy. His influence helped reshape RAF policies. By the 1960s, the Air Force increasingly evaluated injured personnel based on ability rather than blanket medical exclusions, a shift rooted partly in his wartime achievements. His relationship with Germany also shifted. He met former Luftwaffe pilots at reunions, trading stories with men he had once tried to kill. Adolf Galland, with more than 100 victories, became a friend of sorts. Some criticized these reconciliations, but Bader ignored them with the same stubborn cheerfulness he'd shown in 1940. The question of who shot him down in August 1941 remained unresolved. German records pointed to several possibilities. British researchers proposed collision. Some hinted at friendly fire. Bader himself shrugged at speculation. Survival mattered more than attribution. Age eventually overtook him. Decades of strain from prosthetic limbs damaged his hips and spine, and heart problems emerged. He died on September 5, 1982, aged 72, having outlived most of his Battle of Britain peers. His funeral at St. Clement Danes drew hundreds. Pilots, veterans, officials, gathered to honor more than an ace. Marshal of the RAF Sir Dermot Boyle delivered the eulogy, emphasizing not the victories but the demonstration that catastrophic injury need not define a life. Outside, restored Spitfires and Hurricanes roared overhead, their Merlin engines echoing the summer of 1940. Bader's story endures in RAF culture and British memory, sometimes simplified into neat narratives of triumph, sometimes stripped of his flaws, his stubbornness, and the privilege that helped him find second chances. Yet beneath the myth is a deeper truth, that human beings can adapt in extraordinary ways, that institutions must challenge their own prejudices about capability, and that those written off as finished may simply be waiting for circumstances that allow them to prove otherwise.